Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're talking about spiritual circumcision. Spiritual circumcision as spoken of in Colossians 2:11. So let me read that verse for you. And it is right here. Okay. In him, that is in Jesus Christ, also you were circumcised with a circumcision not made with human hands, but in a spiritual circumcision performed by Christ, by stripping off the body of the flesh, the whole corrupt carnal nature with its passions and lusts. That is what has happened at salvation. So here we have spiritual circumcision. Colossians 2:11, which I just read you, tells us very clearly and definitively that the entire flesh mechanism was removed at salvation in totality. And so we have your flesh and your carnal nature has been spiritually removed in totality at salvation. So that is not up for discussion or argument. So what we want to talk about is what was circumcised off of you. Yes, it was the spiritual circumcision. Yes, it was flesh. Yes, it was your carnal nature. But we need to describe and figure out more about that. Okay, so what did it really entail? So I tried to make a diagram here. I'm not sure how good it is, but we have here the law of sin and death right across the board, the middle of the board there. Okay, so we have sin, guilt, condemnation, and death. This is the law of sin and death that Romans 8:2 talks about, but this is just kind of an abbreviation. The law of sin, which begins the cycle, and death, which ends the cycle. So it's kind of an abbreviated term. It wouldn't say the law of sin, guilt, condemnation, and death. It's just the law of sin and death. But it's talking about this process and this law. This is a law. Every time there is sin, there's always guilt. Every time there's guilt, there's always condemnation. Every time there's condemnation, there's always death. So what does sin lead to? That's what this arrow is. Sin leads to guilt. Immediately. They're sisters. Guilt, what does guilt lead to? Immediately, condemnation. What does condemnation lead to? Immediately, death. And that death can be a death of many sorts, but ultimately, in the end, it will be a death of your physical body, and then if you have not had the flesh circumcised off of you at salvation, it will be your soul will perish. Okay, so the law of sin and death is in agreement with Ezekiel 18:20, which says the soul that sins must die. So here we have the cross down here. Here's your cross. Now, what happened when you were spiritually circumcised is that all of your sin, which includes the flesh, the sin nature, and all the individual sins, was put on the cross. All of your guilt, all the true guilt, all the false guilt, all the imaginary guilt, all the any other kind of guilt, on the cross. All of the condemnation that is deserved under the law of sin and death, which used to be in effect and no longer is once you're saved, all of that condemnation went to the cross, into Jesus Christ on the cross. Okay? And then the death that results from all of these is a death, and that happened on the cross. It wasn't your death. If you're a believer, it was Christ in your place. So all of this law of sin and death was imputed into Christ fully. He became sin. He didn't just think about it. He didn't just carry it. He didn't just do any of that. He became it. He became sin. And he became all of the sin for those who believe, so that all of his righteousness could be imputed to us. It had to be a complete 100% final exchange, or it wouldn't work. All right? And so these are two opposing laws. The law of sin and death is opposing, or the opposite of, the law of the Spirit of life, which is the other opposing law that Romans 8:2 talks about. So you have to be under one or the other. You're either under the law of sin and death or under the law of the Spirit of life. Okay? So one of them is fruitless and you have no hope, which is the law of sin and death. The law of the Spirit of life is the one that will set you free from the law of sin and death. It will set you free from all of this. The law of the Spirit of life. And this is the law of the Spirit that raised Jesus Christ up from the grave in resurrection life. And that life is inside you right now if you are a believer in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That exact same resurrection life, His very own life, is in you. And you can feed on that, and you can grow it, and you can become more aware of it, and you can foster it and protect it, and it will become a very powerful force inside you. So the law of the Spirit of life frees you from the law of sin and death. So I hope that makes sense. Spiritual circumcision is a really big deal, y'all. And people don't recognize it. They don't really acknowledge it. They don't understand it. And they don't receive it. They don't receive it from the Lord. And it's very sad because He has done this for us. And He wants us to receive it. And say, maybe you'd say, Lord, I don't understand all this. This sounds too good to be true. But you know what? I am going to choose to agree with you. I'm going to choose to agree with you. How can I walk together with you if I don't agree with you? Well, I can't. So, Lord, I'm going to choose to agree with you that you have circumcised me spiritually in totality, according to Colossians 2:11, and I'm going to just agree with you and let the Holy Spirit do His work in my heart as He sees fit. You don't have to master it. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to analyze it. You can learn about it. You can read the scriptures about it. You can study it, show yourself approved, and you can agree with God. Yes, I believe that you have done this. And the greater depths at which you believe that He has truly circumcised the spiritually circumcised the flesh, the sin nature, and all the individual sins off of you, the more you will tiptoe into that reality. Okay? So this is my encouragement to you that He has, in fact, circumcised you spiritually, and it's okay and it's good and it's right for you to agree with Him and give Him credit and glory for that because He has done it. And then it will help you to walk in a more close relationship with the Lord. All right? I hope that you have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time.